Hello, my friends. First of all, I want to say thank you to Diane and Lisa to organize this event. I'm very grateful to you for, not only for this event but for all those years that we shared since I moved to San Antonio. I want to apologize because it's my mistake. I miscalculated the time I had for the presentation, so at the end of the presentation, I really didn't have time to talk about the topic that most interested you, which is the what happens with the cattle, the Texas cattle for Galvez and for the revolution. So I'm gonna add this part of this video here, and I will show you the documents that I found. Documents in some of the documents that were shared with me by Dr. Dave Carlson. You already know him, and let's get over them. Okay. So first of all, we need to know that there are a document there are a document that is talking about something like 11,000 cows for the revolution. This is a document which is dated in 1785, so it's 5 years after the event. It's very difficult that this document is demonstrating anything. In any case, we have many other documents. We have Dr. Carlson provided me around 20 documents from the Briscoe Center. Those documents are not the original ones, but what he provided me is the translations. And the translations were made by Dr. John Witt, who was the archivist in Briscoe Center in Austin. And I'm very confident, absolutely confident in the John Witt work translating this document. Among those 23 documents, most of them are documents related to exports of cattle to Coahuila, to north of Mexico, and South Texas. Most of them. Then we have only four documents related to exports to the Louisiana, which is west of the Mississippi River. Of those four exports to export to Louisiana, the last one was made in 1782, so there is not action in the south with Galvez related to the revolution, so we have to discard it. The first one was for a buyer, Maria Descendants, who bought 300 head of cattle for herself, for her business in the Nachitoches, the place of Nachitoches. So we have just two that could be related to Bernardo de Galvez. We have the first one, we already know, is about the problem that they had with that export, that they were attacked by the Comanches and never reached destination. And there is a confusion with the second one, which was for Marcos Hernandez, a resident of the Presidio de Béjar, de San Antonio. This second batch of documents for Marcos Hernandez is not related in any way to Bernardo Galvez or to the revolution. We only have to read the documents carefully, and we will find the destination. This guy Marcos Hernandez also bought those cattle, both for himself to sell it in a place in Opelousas or in a place of his pleas, right? So the documents for Galvez, we have a batch of documents for Galvez. They are asking for permission. The permission is granted, and then they round the cattle, and finally they send the cattle. We have a batch of documents. In all those documents, it's very clear the destination of those those herd of cattle. The name Bernardo de Galvez is figured in that appears in that document probably 100 times. So it's very clear that the cattle were for Galvez. The same document is saying that the transport was attacked by the Comanches and they lost everything. And also at the end of that document, they say that the sending more cattle is something that is suspended in that moment. The other two documents related to Marcos Hernandez. One of them is long, is 14 pages long, and never in any moment they mention the name Bernardo de Galvez in any moment. So, and that document states very clear that is for the own profit of Marcos Hernandez. So those documents are not related. In this case, in the Marcos Hernandez, the historiography here in Texas were defending for many years that those cattle were for Bernardo de Galvez. No, I'm sorry. Okay, there is no proof. There is no relation with both batch of documents. Another thing is that in the Galvez documents, we see that he wanted the cattle to breeding, to procreate. Okay, it's very clear in these documents. The Galvez is asking for bulls, not only for cows, but for bulls, because the destination is to breeding in what is now Louisiana. In those Galvez documents, we can read as well that Galvez was asking to carry the herd to Nacogdoches first and then to Natchitoches. And why Natchitoches? Because in that place there was a port over the Red River. In that moment, the Red River was connected naturally with the Mississippi River, and for them was intended to upload the cows in some kind of vessel and navigate down the river till New Orleans. Another important request for Galvez was that the cattle don't lose its vigor, in his own words. So that means that it should be there in Louisiana in a good shape. This is another thing against the idea that they could make 600 miles in just 30 days. So it's practically impossible. They needed to cross rivers, swamps, there are forests, and the nature of those moments were very different from what we know today, what we have today. Another point against the idea of cattle to the revolution is that the George Rogers Clark army, they offered to pay the guns and the powder with beef from the north, so they didn't need the cattle from Texas to feed. And finally, talking about the Galvez army needs in what is the conquest of Pensacola, we are against the time. That's a real problem. In that moment, when the cattle from Texas could arrive, Galvez already was in Pensacola and in Cuba, and the supplies for that conquest, for the conquest of Pensacola, came from Cuba directly. In any case, you will find everything supported, very well supported in my book. So there is as you know, there is a chapter dedicated to the Texas cattle, and just check it in the book. My writing abilities are much better than my speaking abilities, so I'll let you now with the video of the presentation, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Our speaker, Jorge Luis Garcia, he holds a PhD in Ancient World Studies from the Complutense University, an archaeologist and historian, but above all, a researcher. Spanish by birth, specifically from Madrid, and American by adoption. He lives in one of the cities with the richest Hispanic history in the United States, San Antonio, Texas. For 12 years, he has devoted himself to the study of Spanish North America, its history, and its heritage, with several books published on the subject. He now presents Revolution, or Revolution, in which he provides an extensive review of the existing documentation on an important chapter of American and Spanish history, the Spain's crucial role in the American Revolution. And he does so with a straightforward narrative, allowing the protagonists themselves to speak and recount the events. Thank you, Jorge.
Thank you, Lisa. So we are ready. Can you hear me at the door? Okay, I'll try. So too many friends here in this room today. So we have been together for 12 years so far. Well, my first slide, not that one, sorry, that one. Okay, I know that you try just to read what is there, but what is there is a message from President Gerald Ford. And this one is the few moments the USA recognized anything without request. So we have some status here and there in New Orleans, in Washington, D.C., but everything was made after the request of Spain and with probably 4 million signatures, like the portrait of Galvez in the U.S. Capitol. So everything was after hard request. So the only moment that the United States did something for Spain and recognizing the immense, the enormous help that the Spain gave to the United States to get its independence was Gerald Ford in 1976. According to the American historiography, there were 3 different wars that were unrelated. So we have the War of U.S. Independence, and they say that there was an Anglo-Spanish war and an Anglo-French war, and they were not related. No, this is not true, okay? That 3 wars is just one war, the war for the U.S. independence, and you need to get that very clear. So, because people try to just separate. No, this is I'm not interested in this. So, take it out. Okay, that's the problem. And most American historians dedicated to this topic said that Spain did not help the United States, and that Spain was only interested in conquering Gibraltar. So the conclusion they reached is we owe nothing. We owe nothing to Spain, right? That's the conclusion. So if Spain was only interested in conquering a small rock in the south of Spain, why send piles of equipment and money to the Americas? This is absurd, right? So the joke tells itself, right? You need to have this clear. The truth you will discover when you finish reading the book is that Spanish assistance to the independence was of such importance and magnitude that what is truly difficult is to understand how the American historians were able to hide it for 250 years. So this is the truly amazing thing here, how they managed for 250 years to hide it. In the documents, we can see up to 5 different currencies. And this is a mess. This is kind of a mess, right? Because no one of the researchers, no one of the historians can get it right. So what we did first, I worked with a friend who specializes in the Spanish peso, a Spanish historian named Carlos Fernández Andrade, who wrote recently a very big book about the economic part of the American independence, about the peso as a currency, right? And together we found the exchange rates shown in this table. You will find it in the book, right? So one important thing is that here we have peso slash dollar. What that means? That there is no dollar, right? There is only a peso, and they just changed the name for that. So we have real and we have real de Bellón, and the different values that have every single currency through this chart. Okay, so 8 reales correspond to $1, 1 peso. Reales de Bellón, the livre tournois is the French currency, and finally the sterling pounds. All right, so everything is here, everything in documents is using this, so it's a good thing to have that chart, right? Then, dollar was North American. The dollar was North American. It is a Spanish currency. You need to know this. In origin, it's a Spanish currency. Its original name was the peso, peso español, since no other widely accepted currency existed at that time. So when we talk about the French livres or the sterling pounds, this is just an accountant currency. Didn't exist physically. They didn't have the coin of the sterling pound. So in the documents they say we paid X sterling pounds, but they translate that to the Spanish peso. The only way to pay things here and in the world was the Spanish peso. So the first dollar was coined in 1794, long after the independence, okay? So when we are talking now about the dollars, in reality we are talking about the Spanish peso. Well, and that happens that the United States adopted the peso as a currency, right? And this is proved right here, because 1 peso is equal to $1. Why $1 is not equal to a sterling pound? Because they weren't using the sterling pound, they were using the peso, right, as a dollar. So at first, they called it the Spanish dollar. And soon, the word Spanish just was dropped. They dropped the word Spanish. But why we have to give some credit to those Spaniards? So just drop the name, and we keep just the dollar, right? From the very beginning, the United States viewed Spain as an enemy and not as an ally, despite all the help received. So, and we start with some spicy things, right? So when Franklin arrived in Europe in December 1776, he brought a list of supplies. This one, can you see here, right? That he was requesting from Spain and France. So the two crowns agreed to provide 1 million livres, French livres, each to purchase the requested goods and send them to America. However, they could not ship them directly and needed an intermediary, right? So Vergennes, the French prime minister, he said, proposed a friend of his, which name is Beaumarchais, this one that we have here. Okay, he's the friend of Prime Minister Vergennes. Ironically, that name means good business. Okay, so Beaumarchais, the French guy, means good business. Okay, I'm gonna start to suspect something. So if we check American websites about the revolution, many show Vergennes and Beaumarchais as heroes, right? And credit them with making possible the independence. So they were the heroes of the independence, right? The French guys. So to keep the operation secret, Spain sent the money and trusted that France would act honestly. What a mistake. Without asking permission, Beaumarchais added to the bill the purchase of 8 ships and its crew wages. And here we have another interesting thing that I found in the documents, right? So if we look closely to, well, what happens is that France never paid the 1 million livres that they agreed to contribute to the 2 million livres from Spain and France. They didn't pay it in money. So what they did, and this is getting interesting by the moment. So instead, Beaumarchais claimed that France supplied gunpowder, right? Instead of money, they supplied gunpowder and weapons from its stockpiles. I'm getting out of voice. And at a value that forces Spain to contribute to another 2.5 million. So this is kind of getting interesting, right? So we put each one of us, we put just 1 million. And then the bill is, okay, I need to put 2.5 more million? How it works? So if we look closely at the list, we can see several very weird charges. For instance, the 8 transport ship crews were paid 600,000 livres. You don't know what is that, but it's an excessive amount considering that the entire army of Rochambeau, which was 4,000 soldiers, they received just 500,000 livres from France at the end of the war for several months of hardship in America. What that means, that they pay for the 8 crews more than for the whole army. This is the 6,000 that we have around here, right? Right there. 6,000 for the crew. 600,000 livres for the crew. Marché is saying that we should give half of the money to the Americans so that they may guarantee their paper currency and remit tobacco to us. This is what the French is saying, which will be sold to the government at a favorable price. With the other half, we shall purchase gunpowder from our authorities at below the prevailing rate. By selling the gunpowder to the insurgents, the Americans, at market price, I shall make a substantial profit from it. So the French guy is not helping the Americans. He's making a very good profit from this, okay? So the second, that one is very important because the Frenchman claims that he provided the supplies himself out of his own pocket. So the intermediary is saying, this is because I'm so rich, you have all those supplies for you to enjoy, right? The bon marché. The second paragraph is saying, their congressmen will, this is what Beaumarchais is telling to Franklin, right? Their congressmen will find in me a faithful friend, a refugee in my home, money in my coffers, and every means to facilitate their operations, whether public or secret. If possible, I should remove all obstacles that may stand in the way of their wishes in European politics. At this very moment, and without awaiting their reply, I have procured for them some 200 brass cannon of 4-pound caliber, which will be sent to them by the nearest route. I have provided? Really? So from where he got those cannons? We follow 20,000 pounds of cannon powder. 20,000 excellent muskets, several brass mortar cells, blah, blah, blah. So he made a bill for 300,000 pounds of powder, and he gave the Americans just 20,000. So where are the rest? Okay? So it's one over other, right? Here's the pile of the swindle here. So let's keep reading, because this is devastating, right? So Beaumarchais, the good business, was a thief and a fraud, just like Vergennes, the French prime minister, as the evidence shows. This is what the documents are saying. I just reproduced the documents, okay? This is not me saying documents, only documents. But wait, because there are still more surprises to come. So here is a document coming from the American archives. It is the papers of Madison. So at the end of the war, the United States reviewed what was the debt. And oh, surprise, they conclude that they owed Spain nothing from this first shipment, right? They recognize the initial million owed to France, not to Spain, to France, but not the one to Spain. And they acknowledge 3 millions owed to Beaumarchais. See the papers of the Congress. They are recognizing the debt to the intermediary, and not the Spain who was providing the whole thing right here. These are the papers of Madison, as I've said, the American documents themselves. So it looks like the United States of America have been venerating two thieves like Vergennes and Beaumarchais as heroes of the revolution for 250 years. Okay? I'm going to you in a second. So how do you feel? Shocked, right? So stay calm, because this is only the tip of the iceberg. This is the tip of the iceberg, and we already get to the corruption, right? So we are just getting started. So they tell you that. Okay. They tell you that because they didn't want to recognize anything that related to Spain, right? So because Spain was the enemy. French has nothing in America. Spain has everything in America. And by the, what's the name of that? I always forgot. The Manifest Destiny, the United States were growing to Spanish territories. So from the very first moment, they view Spain as enemies, not as allies. That was your, I answered your question? Yeah? Okay. So you see the accounts through here, the account, and the account is saying that French, the debt to French was 38 million livres tournois, which is about $7 million. Okay, 7 million in that time. And they recognize only a small debt to Spain, about $150,000. That the problem is that those Spaniards, they are keeping papers everywhere. Okay? So they are keeping mountains on documents. So that's the problem. We have the receipts. We have the receipts. So in this book, I am telling you that we are just getting started, because in this book there are more than 400 pages. This is 442 pages of documented fraud, deception, betrayal, and piracy. So this is just the type of the iceberg, okay? And we don't have time for me to explain everything that I found, but believe me, it's a lot. And it's something that is not in other secondary resources. Okay, so this is something new. Just by crossing the documents from one place to another place. Just by this. And I have to say honestly that I didn't get deeply. It's just brushing the dust on the surface. And I found all of this. So if we go deep, I don't know what we are going to find there. Okay? When I finished writing this book, the first title that came to my mind was The Great Swindle. And I guarantee you that when you reach the last page of this book is the same thing that you will have in mind. Everything with documents, huh? So almost all of you know me, and everything is about documents. So I have two very good historians seated here, very fine historians and archaeologists, and we follow, as professionals, we follow the tyranny of the documents. If it's not in the documents, I'm sorry, but I cannot say it. So we cannot push narratives about the should, would, could. This is not history. We are only about documents. So now, the root of the tree of Beaumarchais and Vergennes needs to be investigated till the end. Okay? And that was a good question. So who get the money, and they knew, they didn't knew, and all of that. Okay, so from that moment, the Spanish government, what they say? Okay, just we are going to pay the 2.5 millions, but please fire those two guys. So we don't want to see them again, Vergennes and Beaumarchais. So from that moment, they use a guy, Spanish guy, which is Diego de Gardoqui, who became very important because at the end of the war, he became the ambassador, right? It's not really ambassador, it's the in charge of the trade office, but at the end it's ambassador, right? Ambassador to the Congress of the United States. And from that moment, we have all the receipts that this guy who had in that moment a trade company about everything that the Spanish government sent to the insurgents into America, right? We have everything. All the material, muskets, blankets, gunpowder, all came from Spain. Because after the first batch that they sent with Beaumarchais, so there were no more French shipments. No more French shipments. What France did, send some money. From that moment, they didn't send any muskets or blankets or whatever. They sent just some money. For the Continental Army, for Washington to buy some supplies, right? From where? The British are the enemy. The French had nothing, so where they buy the supplies? The only place is in Spain. Okay, that was the Spanish who make a cédula to, from now on, the city has to be built in stone, concrete, and no more lumbers, because lumber has the usual is to burn very fast. So let's use rocks, right? So we are yet once again, the intentional erasing of everything Spanish has led many to call this French colonial style. It's not, right? Forgot about that. So from New Orleans, and with Bernardo de Galvez command, the army of George Rogers Clark received military supplies and money and everything they needed to keep the British in the Mississippi Valley under control, right? So the Americans in up the Mississippi River, they promised to repay with flour and beef. So they didn't need any beef or any cattle from Spain. They had beef and cattle on top of the Mississippi River, right? What is important here is that they promised, but they never made it. They never paid. They never repaid for the help, right? And the help was very important. So another point, very important thing is the uniforms. So the Americans were constantly requesting for uniforms. For any army, the army of the Continental Army was about 10,000 guys, right? So getting all the receipts, we found that Spain provided 130,000 uniforms. So this is absolutely crazy. And Washington was always, every day, complaining that we don't have uniforms. What they are doing with the uniforms then? Because we send 130,000 uniforms. So 13 uniforms for each soldier. So what happens? This is interesting because after that we know that American merchants kept many of these uniforms, the merchants, not the Continental Army, not the states. So they keep those uniforms and resold them as ordinary clothing. And not only the uniforms, also the muskets and everything. So the scheme of corruption here is over the roofs. Or some records said that the uniforms were simply rotting on storage because Congress failed to distribute them to the armies, to the different armies of each state. So the state that received them, imagine Virginia or Georgia, they received that batch of uniforms and they keep them all because in case they might need in the future. Instead of we need 1,000, give the rest to the other states. No, they keep everything. They didn't share with the rest of the states. So, and the same thing happened with other supplies, right? So with the weapons and the gunpowder and everything. Yes, Margaret.
Is this saying that it's also supplying uniforms for Rochambeau's army?
Where are you reading that?
The second to the bottom, right?
Second to the bottom.
Keep going to the right.
This one?
Yes.
Okay, you know that in 1780, the Spanish captured a very big convoy, British convoy. And this convoy was carrying 14,000 soldiers and they were carrying 30,000 or so British coats, red coats. So what the army did with this, they sent to an auctioneer to sell those uniforms, probably for the British, if they repay for that, probably. So a very smart American guy acting as a commissioner for John Jay, they get $15,000 from Spain, a loan from Spain, to buy the red coats. And they send the red coats to America. And when the red coats make to America, they say, "What are you bringing us? This is the uniform of the enemy." So probably in those years, several thousand of Americans, they were wearing red coats here and there.
Often they were over dyed. They were dyed brown.
Yeah, there were
And then used, right?
many things to change that, right? But that was So they get loans from the Spanish government to buy red coats and send to America. So what they were doing for so many years was just denying, and we don't. There is no proof. There is no proof because you are not reading in Spanish, because we have only in Spain, not counting what is in Mexico or in Peru or whatever. In the Archivo General de Indias in Spain, we have around 90 million documents. So read it, get to the archive, read it, and do a good job. That's the problem. That is what is amazing in America, because the Americans, we think that we are the most important in the world, and we don't need to read other guys. So probably the other guys are saying something interesting. So we need to read everything, to close everything, all the documents, to get to the truth. If this is what we plan to do, to get to the truth, because sometimes we probably we don't need to go there. We don't want to go there, right? So that's a point to not read in Spanish. You know that the 99% of the documents until that moment, until the independence of Texas from Mexico, were written in Spanish.
That was my next question to you. Hopefully I'm going to base you from your program. But did you have to get French interpreters as you're reading the French documents?
Non, je parle français aussi. Je peux parler français.
But you can parle français. You have the other person. Okay? People that are not French speakers, that are studying these documents, I can imagine the difficulty.
Well, probably that's a thing that happened before the Google, before the computers.
Okay. Okay.
But now, even if the documents are written in Chinese, you have some equipment to translate that. So there is not more an excuse to no, I cannot read it. So just make it through Google or through the ChatGPT or whatever. All right. So then we go to another very good thing. Oh, by the way, those are the uniforms that were making in Spain. So this is both. This is the Granaderos uniform. The artillery uniform. This one, right? And this one is a captain of the militia. And in the middle is the American uniform of the Continental. So from where the Americans get the uniforms? So the same uniform. Come on. Oh, really? So after send those 20,000 or 30,000 uniforms, red coats, Spain has to send another 30,000 uniforms in blue, because the red and Spain paid for both. So one to the garbage or to the dyers, right, and the other to the official Continental Army. So then we have another hero of the American Revolution, which is Oliver Pollock. So everyone thinks Oliver Pollock was the best of the best of the best, the financier of the American Revolution. Well, in one moment, Oliver Pollock recognized that he had a fortune of $100,000. Good for him. Probably if he spent all his fortune in the Continental Army, very good, thank you. But we have Hamilton after the war telling us that the total cost of the war was $134 million. So that $100,000 of Pollock didn't finance the revolution at all, right? So just to put some in context, right? What happens with Oliver Pollock? Oliver Pollock was getting all the support from Galvez in New Orleans, and carrying that everything to George Rogers Clark in St. Louis area, and to fight the British commandant that in that place was Hamilton. I think the name is Hamilton, right? Probably you know more than me on that topic. And everything came from Spain, from the warehouses of Spain in New Orleans. So Oliver Pollock was taking money as a loan and taking supplies from Spain, giving them to the Virginia insurrectionists, which was George Rogers Clark. And after that promise, we are gonna pay. Don't worry, we have a lot of money, we have a lot of flour, we have a lot of beef. We are gonna pay you with this. The Virginia Congress never paid a single dime, never paid. So after the war, 20 years after the war, we found that in the Treaty of Adam Onis, Quincy Adams, no, that is the son, right? It's the son who take that treaty between Spain and America and the United States. They supposedly the United States paid 5 millions for La Florida. That payment never came because people like Oliver Pollock was demanding Spain for $400,000 debt. So Spain owed money to Oliver Pollock, really? So Oliver Pollock was getting money from Spain, and then, but 20 years later, is Oliver Pollock who is claiming against Spain. So in that treaty of Adam Onis, Spain didn't have, in that moment, Spain was under Napoleon and with a lot of problems, and Spain didn't have the resources to battle in courts that thief. So the United States didn't pay a single dime for La Florida because people like Oliver Pollock. So, excuse me, my English is not so good, but you will find this very well explained in my book. And believe me, I guarantee you that your jaw will drop. Spain conquest, military conquest, conquest the Mississippi River, Mobile, and Pensacola. This is West Florida. But East Florida, which was San Agustin, they never get it military. So what happens that at the end of the war, 1782, Spain conquests the Bahamas, and in the peace treaty after the war, they changed Bahamas by San Agustin. So it's the moment when Spain recovered the total Florida, right? And from that moment, in 10 years, the United States were doing everything in their hands to take Florida from Spain. So sending Jackson, for example, the future president, crossing the border and claiming against the how was the name of the natives there, the Seminoles. That then the Seminoles, after that, they came to Texas, right there, right? So that was part of Spain. But for 20 years, the United States were doing everything to get by force or by any means to get Florida. Okay, so one point is that the United States never paid a single dime for any of the supplies, any of help that Spain provided. And at the end, what we are claiming, because I'm not talking about money in my book, okay? I'm not talking about the money the United States could owe to Spain. I'm at least asking for the truth and for the recognition. Right? The United States must recognize what Spain did for the independence. And you know, because you are a very dedicated group, but we have the rest of the country that hate Spain just because of the black legend and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of very painful to be fighting those guys about the black legend when we know the truth that the United States, we have the independence because of Spain, not because of France. So what I'm asking with the book is that recognition. I'm not asking for the money, right? I'm not asking for the money. Some scholars made a research, and they established that debt put in dollars today, it will be something around $3 trillion. And the whole debt, public debt that Spain has in this moment is for little bit more than 1 trillion. So it could help Spain pay the whole public debt that we have today. So that's the amount of
when you were saying it had $3 trillion worth of debt,
Actual money.
actual money right now, this moment, that is
For the whole help that Spain give to the United States.
during the Revolutionary War.
Yep. When I talk about Spain, I'm talking about the whole Spain. That means South America, that means Mexico, actual Mexico, and I means the Spain, the European country, which was Spain. All of them were helping the revolution. The one very important guy was Francisco de Saavedra, which was named the special agent for the war for the King Carlos III, and he had the blank check for do everything and he was the one to get money for very important things like Yorktown. So what happens in Yorktown? We need to talk about this, okay? Because this is another very important chapter. They think, oh, the Rochambeau, 4,000 soldiers that were fighting in Yorktown. They were fighting with Spanish money. So Spain came to Cuba, to New Mexico, to New Spain, actual Mexico, to get 2.6 million pesos to pay the Continental Army, the French Army, to supply the French Navy for everything. The French put nothing, absolutely nothing. Previous to the Yorktown, Spain paid also 2.5 million pesos just to carry the French Navy from France to the Caribbean to fight then in Yorktown. So the account is coming and coming and coming and without end, right? And everything was paid with that, the pesos, right? The pesos. So what did the French in reality? So everything was paid by the pesos. What did the French? The French allies, they did everything, right? So from 76 to 81, total boots on the ground, one soldier. Lafayette. Lafayette wasn't the French army. He was just one soldier, one mercenary coming here that for any reason make a chemical link with Washington, and Washington named him commander of a small part of his army. One person until 81. What happens in 81? So for the Yorktown siege, the Rochambeau army, they unloaded 4,000 guys, paid by Spain, I told you, right? So Spain supplied them, paid them, clothed them. What else? What else could do Spain for those guys, for those French army, right? We have, as I told you, documents and receipts, and even we have a receipt. Come on, it's not there. Okay, I have a receipt. I promise you, for 4,000 mules. So the French were coming to Spain to get 4,000 mules. You know, the trained mules. So they were getting that from Spain. So, and that was the Spanish court was laughing because of that. What else? What else? Even the mules. So the Spanish sacrifice, and I'm finishing. Don't worry. I'm getting to the finish, but it's so much. This is so much that we have several cathedrals in Spain unfinished because the church in Spain, they put a lot of money, a lot of pesos to finance the American Revolution. We have the Cathedral of Toledo and the Cathedral of Malaga. Just one tower. Everything. So soldiers and sailors, loans and donations. So after that, how you can just have the guts to say Spain did nothing? So really? Really? This is what we... So what happens? That we have a very good patriot, John Jay, right? John Jay I dedicated a long chapter for John Jay. And John Jay was the plenipotentiary American from the Congress in Spain. So they live there in Spain. This is like a hero. He was sent to a Spanish court to live like a king. Okay, and he pretended to believe like a king there, just to talk to the Spanish crown, because he was so important. He asked for money constantly. Every single day was asking for money in the court of Spain. John Jay. His mission was to strip Charles III of money and territory, and to pay nothing in return. That was his mission, his total mission. In 1782, when he grew tired, he left for Paris without even saying goodbye. Even saying goodbye. So he was negotiating with the British while getting money from Spain. Negotiating with the British. He denied the existence of any debt to Spain, and he was a very important person in the Congress, Continental Congress. So he said, no, we owe nothing to Spain. He was in charge of that. And even he urged the British enemy to invade Florida. Okay, so he was getting the help from Spain and advising the British, okay, go to Florida and conquest from the Spanish. So this is a total traitor, okay? So at the end, this is a man, my conclusion on this man has no honor, no worth, or not basic moral principles. And this is what we get in Spain, asking for money. So imagine how deep is everything in this investigation, how deep we can go. We can analyze this guy and everything that he did in Spain. So this is what we got. So the documents we have, and I have a bunch of documents provided by my good friend Dave Carlson. He provided me a lot of documents which are the translations of the documents that they have in the Briscoe, all the documents, and that translation was made by John Witt. So John Witt is one guy that I can put my hand over the fire, okay, because he was the archivist of Briscoe Center for many years, and he did a very good job. About Galvez. Galvez asked for cattle, but the cattle never made it. And after that, the documents that we have after the Comanches take the cattle that was intended for Galvez, we have some documents. For example, Marcos Hernandez was another guy buying more than 1,000 heads of cattle. That cattle was for Opelousas. Yes, Opelousas is Louisiana, but what you find that in those several documents that we have for Marcos Hernandez and for many other rounds that they were sending to Louisiana, not a single time the name of Galvez. So it was normal people living in Louisiana, living in Opelousas, living in Natchitoches that bought cattle and bring them to Natchitoches, Nacogdoches, Opelousas, and Atacapas. This is not intended for Galvez. And we don't have the documents. And the only documents was provided to me, the only documents that talk something about that is a document from 1785. So way after the war. So we don't have documents, honestly, and we don't have the motivation, because the cattle wasn't intended for the George Rogers Clark Army. It's a very short army of 200 in the peak, 400 soldiers. Imagine there are people telling us that they sent 11,000 cows for an army of 200 people. So there is not, okay? So the only thing that we have is an order of the Caballero de Cruas telling Governor Cabello, you have the authorization to send the cows. And we have the same Governor Cabello, a document saying the Comanches get all the cattle, so don't send any more cattle, any more cows. After that, we have another document from Marcos Hernandez asking to buy 1,000 cows and drive them to Opelousas. But you have to read the documents because the first document writing by Galvez say send those cattle to Nachitoches because in Nachitoches we have a port. That means that they plan to upload the cattle on some kind of vessels to go down the Red River and then the Mississippi River to New Orleans. This is what we have. We don't have any document demonstrating that the cattle were for Galvez. One more question, this guy.
So the cattle you're saying in San Antonio, went as far as Nacogdoches, and
Never meant.
never made it to Louisiana.
Never. They get to Opelousas. Opelousas is Louisiana.
How many cattle, because of what I read, what I tell my tourists, if we send 7,000 cattle to San Antonio, go to Texas, Louisiana, if I remember correct, at least on another portion, we send that many cattle at least to Nacogdoches with the intention to beat the Spanish army.
No, we have 300 cows that make for Nachitoches because was a receipt that we have for some woman named Maria San Denis.
So only 300 made it to.
To Nachitoches. And then we have 1,234 cows for Marcos Hernandez who made to Pelusas. But the document itself is saying that those cows were for their own profit, their own benefit. He intended to sell those cows to whoever it was. This is the document saying that. So, but this is something that you have fully developed in my book. So, and we don't have the time now to.
It sounds like more research. I mean, and looking at the archives, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have the Spanish archives in Spain and also in Mexico City. Think of what hasn't been uncovered yet.
Right.
So it's just a matter of you keep looking. And
I'm not saying if in any moment a document appears and I have to change my narrative, I will change it without problem.
Right.
Because I'm a historian and archaeologist, and this is the tyranny of the documents. But in this moment, what we have is the proof that the Cubs never get to Galvez or to New Orleans or to the Continental Army or whoever. Never get. This is what we got today.
what he has uncovered today.
Right.
In case someone else finds something else, right? And in the book, it mentions Orocha and Corbello
Yeah.
as sending cattle, right?
No, probably we have in those documents that Dave Carson gave to me. We have many how do you say
Cattle
many drives, but many of those drives goes to Coahuila, not to Louisiana. They put everything together, and we have more than half of those documents related to the cattle goes to Coahuila and the south, not to Louisiana.
All right. Well, let's give him thank you. And so I want to give Jorge a certificate of appreciation for him being advisor since we started,
Yeah.
2017, right? Since we started, and our new Fiesta medal.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.